I am so excited to share this video with you all today. This was such a fun little project to work on to make sourdough a little bit more exciting. So to make my base recipe, my dough, I am doing a sourdough boule recipe. It'll be linked down below in the description box. I chose to do boule because it does not require the stretch and folds that a traditional sourdough asks for. So this was really easy for me to just throw it together in the mixer, let the mixer do all of the work, and then I could go back later after it had risen and then put it in the fridge and let it hang out overnight. But I do put about 4 cups of flour into my mixer, about 2 teaspoons of salt, a cup of sourdough starter, and a cup and a quarter of warm water. You want to make sure you're using pretty active and bubbly starter for this. And once I get all of those ingredients in the mixer, I let the mixer, like I said, do the work. I put the dough hook on there and I let it go for about probably 10 minutes until it is a pretty decent ball. I do stop it every now and again here, and I do check it to make sure that it's passing the window pane test. If you pull up a piece of the dough and stretch it out a little bit, is it going to break? Can you kind of see through it? This was a little bit denser than I was realizing. However, I have not made bread in quite a while, and I remembered halfway through doing this that when I've made this recipe before, I do about 3.5 cups of flour. I don't do the full 4. So it still turns out fine. It's great, but it is more of a denser dough when you do the full 4 cups. I do give it a mild shape, a really loose mild shape, before I stick it back into the mixing bowl. I do just throw some coconut oil in there, and I just have it all rise in the same bowl that it was mixing in. So I do that. I grab a little bit of coconut oil and then I smear it all around the inside of the bowl, put my dough ball back in the bowl, and then I put it in a warm spot. I did turn my oven on for a little bit because it is pretty cold in my house still. We're at the point of the year where you don't have the heat on yet, but it's still kind of cold in the mornings. So I stuck it on the back of the stove when it was warm and let it rise for most of the day, about 9 to 10 hours. And later that evening, I got a banneton out. I put a tea towel in my banneton. That is my preferred way of rising dough in a banneton, is with a tea towel. They do come with those pre-formed towels, but I don't love those as much as a tea towel. I punch my dough down and then again give it a really mild shaping before I stick it pretty side face down into the banneton, pinch the edges together, and then put it in a plastic bag and let it sit in the fridge about 24 hours or so. You can let it ferment as long as you want, depending on how fermented you like your doughs. You could let this set for a couple of days if you want to have that sourdough a little bit stronger, but I just let mine sit in the fridge overnight for about 24 hours. When I was ready to bake my dough, I pulled out a piece of parchment paper, put a little bit of flour down on it, and then I cut 4 strings of cooking twine so that way I can make my crisscrosses. In the directions that I was following online, they said to make it about 20 inches per string. I think this really just depends on how big your dough ball is. I think I did mine probably about 20 inches or so, and then I formed them all in crisscross patterns all across my parchment, and then I was able to turn my dough out and then tie the opposite ends together to make a little pumpkin pattern. You want to have about 8 separate sections. It's not going to be perfect, that's okay, but it does help kind of give the bread the shape it's looking for when it cooks in the oven. And I did give some pretty scoring to the sides just to give it something a little bit extra fun. And then I took my warmed Dutch oven out of the stove. I put my bread in there, put the lid back on, cooked it for 20 minutes at, I think my stove was probably about 400 degrees. 20 minutes with the lid on, and then another 20 minutes with the lid off. And then out comes this beautiful pumpkin. It is adorable. I just used a knife to pull all of the strings off, to cut them off and everything. And I finished off the pumpkin with a cinnamon stick, which I just think is the absolute cutest, most darling thing that you could put on top of this pumpkin. And then I used one of the extra strings that I had to just tie a cute little bow around my cinnamon stick, and I just thought this was so sweet. If you had some sage leaves or even some basil, you could use those as the greenery that a pumpkin would have. I just think this is so sweet. This turned out so nice, and it is not challenging at all. If you enjoyed this video, please let me know in the comments and subscribe and give this video a big thumbs up. I make new videos every single day on all things sourdough, homemaking, and country living, and I will see you in my next video.